Hey everyone, Michael here, and today I'm going to talk to you about the concept of asymmetrical returns. And what got me thinking about this originally was that I was working on a programming project where I was automating a bunch of trading strategies, right? So you're trading an instrument and you're predicting if the asset or this instrument's going to go up in price or go down in price, and then you decide if you want to go long or you want to short it, and you have to then put in your different type of limit and market orders and stop orders and etc. That's not really important. But the point, what's important is the concept of asymmetrical return. Because for the strategy to work is you have to be right more than 50% of the time, and you would limit your losses. So in the cases where you're not correct, maybe you lose a couple percentages of what you invested. But in the cases where you are correct, you don't just limit your gains to 2%, right? You let it ride as far as it goes and take huge gains. And this is the concept of asymmetric return, where you limit your negative downside, but you don't limit the upside. The upside can go to the moon, as they say. Another example of this is if you ever saw that movie 21 or read the book that is based on Bringing Down the House, where these MIT kids, you know, they count cards and then go to Vegas to the casinos where they can get a statistical advantage by knowing what cards are still on the deck when they're placing their gambles of if the house is going to go bust or if they're going to get blackjack or not. And due to the law of large numbers, over time they're going to come out ahead because they have a statistical advantage, and they limit their losses. But when the deck is hot, as they say, you know, they put their money all in and they double down, and their gains are astronomically larger than their losses. Even though they might come across a huge gain less often than they lose, again, they limit their losses. And then when they do get that one big win, it more than compensates for any losses prior to that. Like another example is you can kind of think of like Silicon Valley investors, right? Like these angel investors. And they might look at maybe 10 companies, and 8 of them are going to go out of business. And they're going to completely lose the complete investment they put into these 8 companies. One company might break even and do okay. And then that last company might be like the unicorn that might explode in value. Now, yeah, they lost all their money in those other 8 or 9 companies, but that was a limited loss, right? They capped their negative loss being just the amount of money they put into it. But when it comes to the company that takes off, they normally own part of the company, and they're going to get a return that's a percentage of how big the company grows. And there's not really any limit to how big it might get, so their returns from that are going to more than compensate for the losses for the companies that didn't make it. And again, this is an example of asymmetrical return. Your gains can be huge, and you can limit your losses. That is, the benefit of taking the risk far outweighs the negatives of taking that risk. A book that I recommend reading is called The Richest Man in Babylon. I'll link to it below in the description. And this book really should be required reading for any student in high school. But of course, our economy is kind of built on debt cycles, and this book teaches about how to properly invest your money and the concepts of compounding interest and asymmetrical return. And if the average American actually understood these things, they would probably never go to college or take out those student loans or take out those mortgages when they could do the math to figure out how badly they could be screwed by the interest in the long run. But that point aside, the book has a lot of really good points, and one of them is that it tells a story about this guy who arrives at a city really late at night, and this is the book's set back in ancient Babylonian times, right? And he arrives outside the city, and it's already too late, and the city has locked its gates for the night, so he's forced to camp outside the city. And while he's camping there, a sheep farmer comes with his herd of sheep, and who plans to sell the sheep inside the city the next day. But then the sheep farmer, while there, receives a message from someone that his wife is sick at home, and he must now go home to see her. So now the sheep farmer is left with this dilemma where he needs to go home to see his wife, but he needs to get rid of these sheep. He got all the way there, but he can't wait until morning because his wife is so ill he needs to go now. So he tries to make a deal with this other guy who's waiting outside the gates of the city and says, look, I'm going to sell you all these sheep at a discount now, and you can sell them for an even greater profit inside the city because I really got to go. Now it's really late at night and it's dark, and the guy can hear the sheep, and he hears there's quite a few of them, but he's not really sure if there's 200 of them like the guy says. Maybe the guy's trying to trick him, right? Maybe there's only 100 sheep. And so the guy has to make a choice where he needs to decide, okay, should he take the risk of buying the sheep and then reselling them for the another profit in the city the next day, or not trusting the guy and not taking the risk at all. And so in the end, he ends up not taking the risk, and the morning comes, it turns out there are 200 sheep, and the sheep herder then sells them for 3 times the price what he offered the guy the night before. So that guy could have tripled his money had he taken them the day before and then sold them himself inside. So he lost out on this chance to make a profit. And this is an example of asymmetric risk, right? The guy really should have took the bet. I know now we're looking back in hindsight, but statistically, mathematically, he should have took it, because let's say he only could have verified there's 100 of the sheep. But, you know, he gets the sheep at enough of a discount that even if there is only 100, and he knows in his mind he probably can at least sell them for double the next day, what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen? He's going to break even, right? His time and energy, yeah, it sucks, but it's not really a bad case scenario. But what's the best case scenario? The best case, there is 200 sheep, and he can sell them for 2 or 3 times what he buys them and make a huge profit, which ended up in this story being the case of what would have happened. So this, again, is an example of asymmetric risk. Him taking the risk had very limited downside, because he probably could have about broke even. But the upside would have been making a huge profit. And when you put yourself in a lot of these positions in life where there's a very limited downside, but a very big upside, and again, due to law of large numbers, if you're putting yourself in these positions often, the chances of you finally getting to a position where you make a huge return on your money, or return on your investment in activities, or whatever you're doing, is going to come along eventually. Tim Ferriss defines risk as the chance of an irreversible negative outcome. That is, how much time and energy will it take for you to get back to where you started? This definition allows us to separate out the often illogical mental fears we have that are inflated by our emotions from those of actual real risk. Because it's often just our monkey brain and our emotions blowing things out of proportion, and we're not really evaluating the situation accurately. So now let's tie in this idea of asymmetrical risk into improving one's social skills. What is really the worst case scenario of going out and interacting with new people and trying to improve your social skills? Pretty much maybe only some temporary embarrassment. Nothing major. But what could you really gain from it? Well, you could gain a lot. You can network with people and find a new job. You can meet your significant other and a person to start a family with. You could make new friends who you then have like life-changing experiences with. Again, this is a huge asymmetrical risk for putting in just a little bit of time and effort to improving your social skills. The downside is very limited and fleeting, and the upside is, life-changing. So when it comes to improving your social skills, this asymmetrical risk really makes sense to try to put resources and time into trying to improve them. The worst scenario of going out and meeting people is maybe you just don't make a connection with any person. No big deal. And maybe some interactions don't go so well, but they're still learning experiences. You can still analyze them and use that information to improve your social skills in the long run, which makes the whole time spent still a net positive. You need to position yourself in life to be available for potential opportunities. And potential opportunities normally come from meeting other people and interacting with them, and then that network creates more opportunities at an exponential rate than one person could ever do alone. And then as you go for these opportunities, they multiply as they're seized. We often associate taking an action with potential risk, but often it's actually inaction that's the most riskier decision. A person who continuously takes action is constantly presented with new opportunities for growth, while doing nothing leads to stagnation and a person to have less options and maneuverability, while their negative beliefs and ideas and traits all then start compounding. There is an asymmetrical return for bettering your social skills. Some initial discomfort can then result in you having the ability to build the dream life that you always desired. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If you're not able to communicate your ideas in a way that you can get other people on board, you're likely never going to be able to achieve your goals. So those of you interested in improving your social skills, specifically when it comes to attraction and dating, then I recommend you check out my book. And for those of you super serious about getting this area of your life handled, I provide both in-person and online coaching, and links to all this stuff can be found in the description below. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, ciao.